Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 4 says this: He is the rock, his works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong. Upright and just is he. A few good things have come out of this COVID time over these months since last March. One of them would be the ways that communities have come together. At the start we went outside at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening and clapped for the health service. That was quite popular, and quite a number of our neighbours used to come out at that time, and sometimes you saw people that we wouldn't normally see. Perhaps you've noticed too that in some of our local towns and villages they have rows of painted rocks. School children have taken the effort to select a stone from the beach and they have painted it. Sometimes these rows of stones go on for several hundred yards. We noticed some today when we were down in Ferry Den. Along the river wall there are these stones which have been painted. Some are really good pieces of art, and they have a picture perhaps of a rainbow or a Scottish flag or a poem that a child has written, and some of them have a Bible verse. For us, of course, that's really nice, and most of the rocks were just sea-washed granite. They were all done in defiance of COVID, all saying that we will not be beaten by this virus. One day soon, the infections will end and life will return to normal. And in the meantime, it is important that we set our hearts firmly on a good foundation, to have substantial hope for the future and be secure in our beliefs and certainties. In our devotion verse today, the context is right at the end of Moses' life. He'll soon be taken away from his people into the presence of God. He has been consistently guided by the Lord in every situation. It's his testimony, after 40 years knowing God as his guide, that he is his rock, his works are perfect, and all his ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong, upright and just is he. So in 4 lines, Moses sums up his experience of the presence of God. He is the rock, he is perfect, he is a holy God, he is just, he is faithful, and he is upright. So quite a lot in one verse. So the rocks in the seawall in Ferry Den were just large stones. One day a high tide might wash them away. The paint on the rocks could get washed out, and then they drop back into the sea that they came from. But Moses is thinking of something that's absolutely permanent. When God is the rock, he never changes. For all of us, our lives are a bit like the autumn leaves. A puff of wind and we're blown away. But God stands sure. Throughout the generations, he has proved immovable. He will never change. When we look at a Scottish hillside, we see many rocks which have been in position for thousands of years. Then we hear of a landslide after heavy rain, destroying roadways and railways, and civil engineers are presented with a huge problem of how to secure a mountain. But God, he never changes. He is immovable. When we trust in him, even through these difficult times, he is a rock in a weary land. Isaiah says this: "See, a king will reign in righteousness, and rulers will rule with justice. Each one will be like a shelter from the wind, and a refuge from the storms, like streams of water in the desert, and the shadow of a great rock in a thirsty land. What could bring more encouragement in these days than a great rock in a weary land? Perhaps you get the impression that all of our national leaders are floundering in a mire of uncertainty. There is no real solution to the COVID problem. And what could be better than a great rock in a weary land? He is the immovable rock, and it's good to trust in him and have him to trust in. At the moment I'm reading Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth, which is a medieval novel about the building of a cathedral. It underlines all of the skills needed: the selection of rock from a quarry, how to transport the rock to the building site before mechanisation. The mason's work is in trimming and shaping and the rock, the digging with huge effort the foundations. It is usually skillful and creative. In that culture, the spiritual sensitivity is for the glory of God. Moses could look back on rocks, the huge cliffs of Sinai, the rocks on which the 10 Commandments were written, the rock from which living water came. He was sensitive to the enduring character of these rocks, so he identifies the power of God as a rock. It is a God, this is a God who is faithful. His promises never change. His holiness never changes. He is perfect and upright. And David, he presents us with another idea in Psalm 40. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. The rock then becomes a firm, secure, reliable resting place when all around have reason to fear. It's just recently that I've noticed from this psalm that he lifts us out of the slimy pit. We don't struggle out of the slimy pit ourselves, but he takes us with his strong arms and lifts us out of the slimy pit. It's as though these mighty arms from the sinking sand and the slimy pit are there for us just to trust in, and we stretch out our hands. We are unable to move in our own strength, but he lifts us out. What we cannot do ourselves, he does, and he sets our feet on a rock. And in 1 Corinthians 10 verses 1 to 4 it says this, that this rock is Christ himself. In these times we need a saviour, and Bev Shea sings this song. In times like these you need a saviour. In times like these you need an anchor. Be very sure your anchor holds and grips the solid rock. This rock is Jesus. Yes, he's the one. This rock is Jesus, the only one. Be very sure. Be very sure your anchor holds and grips the solid rock. So it's good to be firmly founded on the rock, to trust in Jesus in everything. In days of uncertainty, he never changes or fails. He has given everything for us. His mighty arm lifts us in time and with assurance into eternity. He is the rock.